Okay. All right. Today I have Anna Saccone on my YouTube channel that she's been kindly willing to be interviewed for. And she is someone who has gone through recovery, has had a long road getting there, and has some really interesting and inspiring things to share with you today. So I'm going to let Anna just kind of go over or just briefly introduce herself, and then we've got some questions to ask her. So go ahead, Anna.
Thank you. So I'm Anna. I have 4 children. I'm a mom of 4, just like Becky. And I stumbled across Becky's YouTube channel about, is it 2.5 years ago now? Sounds like a long time, but yeah, I think it is.
I know.
During my recovery, and it was a huge, huge help to me. I struggled with bulimia for 15 years. Throughout, having babies, my teenage years, my early 20s, my mid 20s, my early 30s, like it just kind of kept going. And then tried to recover at one stage and was kind of okay for a little bit, and then relapsed really badly after the birth of my 4th baby. So, the whole having children, pregnancy, childbirth, and the eating disorder was very intertwined. So that's why I found it so great to find another mom out there that had been through recovery, because I kind of felt like everybody else that was doing this was so young, and so they just weren't at that stage yet. So Becky's channel helped me massively to recover, and I'm really happy that I found it.
Oh, you're so nice. Well, I'm just so glad that it helped. I never know who's listening or who or how it's helping. And I know there's a lot of moms out there for sure who are struggling, and there really isn't a lot out there that applies to mom. Recovering is its own beast, but recovering as a mom, which, can you hear my daughter screaming in the background? Can you hear that? Yeah. So I'm going to just excuse myself for 1 second and ask her. I have my daughter who's helping today, but I told her to maybe keep her away from the door. It sounds like that's not working out great. So just 1 second.
It's fine. No.
Yeah, she was outside playing, and anytime she has to come inside, she every single time throws a huge fit. So sorry about that.
No,
is that too distracting? Should we?
No. Okay. It's very, very faint on my end, so no,
okay.
Totally fine.
Anyone that follows me or listens to my YouTube channel already knows Hazel well, and knows that she likes to cry and scream and wave at the camera. So anyways, so I'm just so glad that you're another mom out there who has been able to be brave enough to tackle proper recovery. And I want to ask you that too in just a minute. Like you said, you attempted recovery initially and you were doing better. And when we spoke earlier, same thing, you mentioned you felt like you had gotten to a place that felt sustainable and that was so much better than where you started, but still after you had a child, the birth of what number? Your 4th, right?
Yeah, 4th.
Yeah. Your 4th, things kind of spiraled backwards. And you mentioned before, and I'll let you speak more to this, just about how you felt like your brain wasn't able to fully rewire. Nothing really changed that much in the brain. It was just kind of more doing the things you knew you need to do to kind of keep your weight up and kind of free yourself from, being so restrictive with food.
Yeah.
So I guess first I want to ask you, what got you into trying this approach to recovery? Yes, you heard the message, but how did you just maybe this makes sense, or I've tried nothing, everything else, I may as well, what got you to take that first step?
So I think when I first heard about it, because I first heard about it a while ago, a long while ago, probably even around the first time that I tried to recover, but never really bought into it. It seemed too extreme to me, and I was like, I'm just not going to be able to. And other people could do that, but that's not for me.
Totally. Those are the crazy people that would ever do it that
way. I just thought no, and I it's funny because now I see that from other people, and I can see myself in those people, because they want to recover, but they're not ready to take that big final step to like proper, like real recovery. They're just not ready for it, or they just come up with 100 excuses as to why it won't work for them. And I was one of them. So it makes me sad sometimes when I see that or hear that. And I know, I mean, you're more of an expert than I am, obviously, but I'm sure you know what this is like to kind of, to hear people that are struggling or kind of say that they have recovered, but you know, from just talking to them that they haven't properly.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that really sad, because I'm like, if only you knew that this was actually possible. So I think I saw a lot of it kind of online. I saw a lot of people that, and I could tell the difference between the people that were recovered, but they were obviously still struggling, and then people that were actually fully recovered, like completely done with their eating disorder. And I always wanted to be one of those people, but I felt that I couldn't. And so I think the proof was just in the pudding for me. Like I saw it happen time and time again with enough people to realize that like maybe I wasn't so different, like maybe it could work for me. And I think what encouraged me probably the most is seeing, like, I don't want to say older, because I'm not old, you're not old, but older people, like as in moms or people with kids, that encouraged me to take that step and actually go for it myself. Because I did at one point just convince myself that it was like a young person's thing. And, you know, I wouldn't be able to do it because I've been through pregnancy and childbirth, or like there's no exception to it, I've learned now, but I just had come up with every kind of excuse to get me out of actually fully accepting it and fully going with it. But I think you do that anyway, and your eating disorder will do that, you know, just use anything.
Those are some really common ones I hear. It's just like, I'm a mom, I'm too busy, I can't, or it won't work for me, I'll gain and gain and gain and gain until I die, it's just never going to stop. So some of the most prominent ones, and I think you mentioned this as well, was, well, I don't even look like other people look that should be doing this. Like I don't even look sick, quite right. I don't have an unhealthy or a, you know, too low enough BMI. And like that's the one that I probably hear the most, of people just feel like they're not like validated in their illness to deserve the proper recovery that they really like honestly do deserve. And it's so sad to see. And I tell people this all the time, and I'll reiterate it again in this interview. I don't know, honestly, probably at least 80% of the people that I work with are in a normal, quote unquote, BMI. You know, so this excuse that it doesn't work for me, or I can't, or I'm not, you know, low enough, or maybe I should lose more so that it really would work for me properly. All of that is just a load of crap. It doesn't work. And you know that now, and now you see that other people are making the same excuses. So if you're someone listening to this, please just trust that none of that matters. It really doesn't. This does and can work for everyone. So
I've never been at I don't think I've ever been like technically underweight. Like even at my lowest ever, I was still classed as like health. I was, you know, on the lower end, but I was still classed on the BMI chart as healthy, which really told me how messed up that is. That whole chart is, because I know, looking back and looking at pictures, I was unhealthy. Like there's no question. I was never meant to look like that. I just wasn't. And people can argue that, you know, because I know that back then a lot of people probably thought that my body was goals, but there was nothing goals about it. Like it's not natural for me. I've never been naturally that small. And on the inside, I was so unhealthy. Like I probably looked goals or healthy or whatever our warped kind of like idea of health is, but I wasn't the furthest thing from healthy, you know. And it's just so I felt like a hypocrite all the time as well. I felt like a fraud, you know. I felt like I was dying on the inside. I was obsessed with food. Like I just thought about food 24/7. That's not normal. Doesn't matter what weight you are, that is not normal. You could be, you know, a much, much higher weight, and that could be your reality too. And you're just as unhealthy, but you could also be super skinny and be thinking about food. It's still, no matter what weight you are, that mindset is still unbelievably unhealthy. And I think you don't realize it until you get out of it and you realize that there's so much more to life than food. You know, it doesn't even come like, yes, I like food. I've always enjoyed food, but I wouldn't even list it as like one of my interests anymore, which is weird to me because in my eating disorder, I definitely would have. Um, yeah, I enjoy cooking. Well, actually, I don't really enjoy cooking right now because the kids
Yeah.
and it's just stressful. But I enjoy baking
Totally.
sometimes, but it's not like I wouldn't probably list it as a hobby. It's
Right.
just like something that it's a means to an end. Like if I really want homemade cookies, I'll bake the homemade cookies, but it's not like
Right.
it's just a completely different way of
Totally.
thinking.
I
Yeah.
like how you say that. It's a means to an end. Like I love to bake, but because I want brownies, because I want cookies, because I want
Yeah.
the cake, right? It's not because I want to lick and taste and be by food and pick out, it's like
Yeah.
that part
No.
I'm not interested in that part. If someone
Yeah.
just wanted to make it for me, I'd be fine with that too. But yeah, totally get what you're
Yeah.
saying. It's the same thing with cooking. It's like I was actually just telling my family, like, can someone just give me some inspiration for like cooking? I'm sober now. I'm
Yeah.
so sick of trying to figure out what to make for this family. Everyone's
Exactly.
so like, I don't like this, I don't like that. No matter
Yeah.
what I make, someone's complaining. I'm just over it. I don't care anymore. Like I
Yeah.
hate cooking. So
Yeah.
I think that I am with you on that, where I used to be obsessed with it and I'd plan it out and think about it all day long. And then I wouldn't even sit down and eat it with my family. And it's just such a different ball game when
Yeah.
you're in a place where you're not so fixated on food. Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's so great. Okay. So what were your first steps when you finally decided, okay, I'm doing this? Were
Mm-hmm.
you like, okay, I've got this plan, or I'm just going to kind of go day by day, or I'm just like, I see food, I say yes, I go for it. Did you have any kind of like, what do you remember those initial? Because I always feel like those initial couple of days when you decide that you're going to do this are so paramount. Like they are so incredibly important for someone starting recovery, because I feel like it sets the stage. I feel like it sets the bar and gets your mind in the right place. Those first initial steps. So tell me what that was like for you.
Yeah, I think so. In the beginning, I definitely started slow, because I was scared, like probably
Mm-hmm.
everybody. So I
Mm-hmm.
had I had this plan in my head that, okay, so I'll add some more to like breakfast the first week,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then the next week I will add some more to lunch. Well, it didn't work that way
Mm-hmm.
because it was almost like when the beast was awoken, I don't want to say all hell broke loose, but like it's like the floodgates opened, and as soon as I started to allow myself to eat things that were not allowed before, my body's just natural response was to eat everything and anything. The only difference was that this time, because of the research that I had done into it, like, watching your channel, watching Tabitha's channel, watching like a lot of other people out there that had recovered properly, this time I was armed with the knowledge that, okay, this is probably going to happen. Like, you're probably going to experience extreme hunger. Whereas in the first time that I tried to recover, I didn't know any of this. So I just thought that I had replaced, when this happened, I thought I'd replaced my first eating disorder with another one, which was just
Mm-hmm.
binge eating. This time I didn't think that. I knew
Good.
ahead of time that this probably would happen, and I just kind of went with it. But it was scary. Like, I say it so simple, like, oh, I just went with it. It wasn't that simple. It was there was so much anxiety, there was so much worry, there was so much uncertainty about what was going to happen. But I think what kept me going was just the knowledge that there are other people out there that have done this ahead of me. And so I just had to kind of blindly trust that things would work out. But it was still pretty blind, because you always think that, again, like I said, that you're the exception. It's not going to work for me. It's not going to be the same. I'm
Totally.
so much bigger than I used to do that. Like, I used to compare myself to other people and think like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I'm bigger than that person. And
I'm
also,
gaining so much faster. That was my thing. I'm getting so much
yeah,
faster than anyone else. I don't care how much other people are eating. I'm gaining so much faster.
yeah,
Something's wrong with me. Mm-hmm.
exactly. And also, I have to say that, like, at that time, I probably did think that I was bigger than, or eating more than, or, the comparison game. But actually, your brain is so messed up that those things probably aren't even true. And they weren't true
Mm-hmm.
but I could not see myself the way that a
Mm-mm.
normal person sees
Mm-mm.
themselves. And
You
that
don't until
doesn't,
you're removed from it.
no, it doesn't hit you until much, much, much later. And you realize, like, yeah, I was actually like really, really thin, and I really needed to,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
and even if you weren't, like, say if you weren't, like, it doesn't matter. You still have to believe, have to know that you don't see yourself the way that everybody else sees you. So
Right.
in a way, it doesn't actually even matter. Like, you just have to
Right.
accept that your brain is sick when you're in an eating
Right.
disorder and it's not functioning properly. So, the how skinny or not skinny you are doesn't actually come into it, because your brain is just messed up. Like, you can't process things the way a normal person can. So I would just like
Totally.
try and leave that all aside, because it's not even real.
Totally. And I think we forget often this is a mental illness. Like, regardless of what size you are, what size you think you are,
Yeah.
what's your head at, So in my coaching sessions, I'll often ask these mental state markers like, well, are you afraid of, certain foods, or just being spontaneous, or being impulsive with food, just grabbing something cause you anxiety, does taking time off of exercise freak you out? If your jeans are tighter one morning, does that scare you? Are you
Yeah.
obsessively checking out your body? Like, those are the things that we're looking at here. It doesn't matter what you are think you're saying or not saying, or what size
Yeah.
you are or not size you are. It's mental illness. And
Yeah.
so if you're in recovery and you're questioning everything because of the way you look, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can always go back to, here are these things that I know are still going on in my head and they're disordered, therefore I must keep going. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a great point that you
Yeah.
make, for sure. Yeah. So kind of started slower, then that extreme hunger, it sounds like, kicked in. That's the terrifying part, where
Yeah.
everything kind of just like you open the floodgates, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. Oh my gosh. And I think it's good to recognize that that's why people hold on, and that's why you and myself as well held on to that tight control,
Yeah.
because you're so afraid of that. Any deviation to throw you over into this phase of, holy crap, I'm freaking starving. And I think that's
Exactly.
where people have to know that, knowing that time we expect that was normal thing, and there and
Oh, it just froze for a
are you
second.
there? Okay.
Yeah.
Did
Sorry.
you where'd I get cut off? Was I just
um. Oh, what?
knowing, I was saying, like, knowing ahead of time when you started this last time that binging was totally normal.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like obvious after restriction that you're going to want to eat a lot of food. It was still scary, like you said, but it was doable because you knew you weren't a freak in nature, and this wasn't like
Yeah.
turning into a binge eating disorder. You knew this was kind of part of nature taking its course. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's important too for people to remember, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So what was the hardest part of your recovery, would you say?
So I think the hardest part was definitely trying to tune out the noise of just diet culture in general. Like, people, it's just so difficult because people will say things, well-meaning people will say things, and comment. And I feel like this side of recovery is probably not, or not this side of recovery, but this type of recovery, like real recovery, is probably not, it's not so widely recognized that a lot of people even know about it. So it can be quite, it's just different, right? So not a lot of people know about it. Not a lot of people in my real life talked about it or were educated on it. So it was kind of like you're going against everything else around you and everything else that people are saying and everything else that you've been taught from a really young age. Like, that's what I found, I think, really difficult, is that I had to really properly rewire everything that I'd been taught from really, really young. And that goes back to like childhood, like
Mm-hmm.
comments that even my parents had made, not even knowingly, but it's just like
Mm-hmm.
us as a society. And, we
Totally.
are changing, but there's still, people, it's even as simple as like, you'll see someone on TV and your parent, whether it's your mom or your dad, will make a statement about how that person looks. Like, it can be as simple as that, but that plants a seed when you're
Mm-hmm.
so small. And then, it's like, it even happens now. Like, I see it with my kids now, like things that I have certainly not said to them, but that they've picked up because society proves that like this body type is better looking than this one. And it's really sad because it sometimes, in some ways, it doesn't really matter how we teach. Like, of course it does matter, but they're always going to be affected by outside things. Like, you know, we've got the plus size Barbies now, and we've got, but it's like, it's almost too little too late. And also it's not, the fact that we even need plus size Barbies is kind of ridiculous.
It's sad, right? It's like
know?
they make this big campaign that we're launching this like it's something that they need to be applauded for. It's like, why wasn't that a thing? Because it's always been a thing. There's always been people in various size bodies. Like, why is this something that we're suddenly just acknowledging might be something that would be good to incorporate for children to be exposed to? It's just so weird.
And even the fact that the plus size Barbies, they're really not plus size.
they're not, right? They still are perfectly curved. It's just like, oh my gosh, like you guys still missed it, right? Like,
it is like hard. And so I think just going against all of that is just so difficult. And it's even difficult with, you know, like my husband was so supportive, and bless him, like he stayed with me throughout the whole thing, which I think is probably, you know, that in itself is not easy. But even he would say things like, he would get confused as to what to kind of say at times, because I was one way and I was so like, you know, invested in this diet culture for so long. And for as long as you've known me, I had an eating disorder. So I said things that were messed up. I made comments that were just like completely awful about not just my body type, but other people's body type. Like I was really judgmental when it came to bodies, because that's how I was taught growing up.
Totally.
And so, you know, we would comment on things together. And then all of a sudden I went through recovery and I was like, anti-diet culture and like, you know, health at every side. And he was just like, whoa.
Yeah, totally. Yep.
So he was trying to catch up, but at the same time, he was kind of like, okay, which Anna are we getting today? And then he would also witness my breakdowns when I would cry about how I've got really fat and I hate myself and I hate, you know, like that's a reality as well. I wasn't like positive all of the time. Even though I was trying so hard to kind of like embrace this new me, but it was not all, you know, it was not all amazing at all times. So he didn't really know what to say. He would, and he said the wrong thing sometimes. And I think he found that really difficult, just kind of like, in a way, I think when you go through recovery, well, you change a ton as a person, and you have to kind of go through this whole like growth period where you're all changing in every way, shape and form, not just physically, but mentally as well. And I think for the people around you to play catch up with that can be really difficult. And I probably didn't really even give him, you know, because I'd lash out. He was like the punching bag because he was there all the time.
Right.
So if he said the wrong thing, I'd lash out sometimes. And yeah, it's just difficult. Like, and your moods are everywhere, and, you know, you're up and down and up and down and up and down. But he would say it all the time. He was like, it's like, I married this person and now you're this person. And I'm just trying to, he was like, I'm not talking physically. I'm talking like, you know,
totally.
In other ways. Right. So he was like, I just don't know. I'm trying to keep up and I'm trying to learn along with you. Like I remember saying to him, how it was actually really toxic to compliment somebody on their weight loss, which is something that I had done like tons.
Totally. Yep.
I mean, I've made that.
We take a slice of humble pie when we go into recovery. All the things we did and said and help people to lose weight, and people come to you with diet, like, you know, inquiries. And it's like, you kind of just have to take a step back and just be like, I forgive myself. I hope everyone else can as well. Moving on. So go ahead.
But no, so I remember sharing that with him, and he was like, oh, okay. And he's like 42. So he's lived a life where, you know, his mom has always kind of acted a certain way when it comes to, and, you know, all of the women in his family would just, and men too, but especially women, they compliment each other on weight loss. Like that's just what they do. And so he was like, oh, okay. And then I remember him trying to take on everything that I was saying and and poor thing, he had to listen to, you know, I'd watch like a video on this part of recovery and then I'd relay the whole message to him. And he's like, I really don't care. Like, this doesn't affect me, but he listened.
Totally.
I remember he saw, a woman that we both know at, I think at the gym or like at a yoga studio or something. And he said, you know, she looked great. Like she'd obviously been working out. She'd lost a lot of weight. And he said it was on the tip of my tongue. Like I was about to compliment her. And then I stopped myself. And because of what you said to me, I just didn't say anything. And he was like, I felt so wrong. But actually afterwards, I was really thinking about it. And I was like, you know what? She's right. Like, how do I know that she hasn't been sick and that's the reason why she's lost weight? Or how do I know that she hasn't got an eating disorder and that's going to affect her in a really negative way if I say something? And he really thought about it. And I found that so interesting, because here's someone he's never had an eating disorder. He's never been affected, aside from me, he's never been affected by one. And he's learning at the same time. Like I thought that was kind of cool.
So cool.
You could have that, my recovery could have that effect on someone who was so like, you know, he's so unaffected in a lot of different ways by that kind of issue. Like he's never had a food issue. He's a straight man, and not that straight men don't get eating disorders, but you know what I mean? It's just never, it's never been a thing for him ever. He's a normal eater. But for him to kind of just think about that was just so interesting. And to this day now, he won't ever do it again. He'll never compliment anybody on weight loss or even mention it. Whereas I think we both were so conditioned to do it before. Like that was just what we were taught, you know?
That is so cool. And that's just like one small change in your husband. And now you've got your kids. I'm sure you're going to educate them not to do that. Their kids, like there's this generation before us, right? Our parents, grandparents, and it's shifting slowly, but like we can be the change to then help educate our children that are then going to educate their children. And it's just so cool, I think, to be that change. Like we are, you and I are that change. And just before we move on, your husband and my husband need to become friends, because I think they could tell stories from now until forever about what it was like to be with someone that was like so sick for so long. And then all of a sudden like goes from one day of weighing their lettuce to the next day eating out of a Ben & Jerry's car. Like this is your life. Like just like, what's that? I'm confused. Like, I don't understand. Is this good? Yes. Good job. Like you just never knew what to say or do. And same thing with swinging from one extreme to the other, where I was like, heavily into dieting and macro counting and calorie, all that crap, right? And then I swung to like health at every size and every, you know, like every size is good. Don't you dare say diet. Never say that. I was just so crazy that way. And then over time, you just, I don't want to say you lose interest, but you kind of don't care anymore as much. And you just kind of find a balance where it's like, you just like, if people want to go do keto, I honestly don't care. Like if that works for them, great, go do keto. If you want to do intermittent fasting, I know with my history and what I'm dealing with in life, never going to work, right? It's just not going to work. And so you get to a place where you're not quite as sensitive. It sounds like you're getting to that place or are there. And it's a nice place to be. It's just really a lot more comfortable.
It's so interesting because I was so like, almost like activist-y, which is, there's nothing wrong with being an activist.
Right. It's great. It's good. Yeah.
But I think I was just, because you have to, it's like a pendulum swing. Like you just have to, if you're really rewiring like your brain and everything, that is just something that you have to do. And I think he knew that. He was like, yeah, no, she's probably going to come, not that she's going to come back the other way, but like she's going to come back and be a bit more balanced.
Right. Totally. Or I would be like very much, which I think you should be in recovery. I think you need to protect your recovery first and foremost. So if you're sitting at a table and people are talking about diet, you need to get up or you need to ask them to stop, for sure, do that. But you will get to a point where you can sit there and kind of tune out or just not be interested or just like, just if anything, for me, it just makes me really grateful for where I'm at, that doesn't consume every thought anymore. Right. And so you'll get to a place where it'll feel more comfortable, but it's a good point. I love that. Okay. Did you ever consider giving up? And if so, what kept you going? Did you get to a point where you were like at your breaking point and just thought, maybe I messed up, maybe I should go back, maybe I can't do this?
Yeah, like many times. I mean, so I was very, very headstrong that I was going to do this though. And I think that's what kept me going. So at the forefront, there was that like, okay, I am doing this, like, this is it. But then obviously, like I said, the outside influences come in and people's little comments and, you know, if you go through a January in your recovery, which I'm assuming everybody will, if they stick it out for long enough, that is so difficult. I think that is one of the hardest periods actually, which we're in right now. But I think that's one of the hardest months to go through in recovery, because every single thing is like diet, lose this, lose that, you know, gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, like, oh my gosh, it's just like everywhere. And it's so difficult to tune that out, especially so early on in recovery. I did have a blip, and it wasn't January, interestingly enough. I think it was actually in it was right in the beginning of the pandemic. So do you remember when everybody was like either they were eating everything in lockdown, or they were like fitness pros, like going out for runs every day?
It's like one extreme or the other.
Yeah. And I think I took that a little bit like too far. I was like, okay, I'm going to be one of those people. And I was still I was pretty early on in recovery, like too early to even like think about stuff like that. And so I saw I think I probably on Instagram, I saw somebody who was promoting Beachbody, and they were like, oh, it's not a diet. But of course it is.
It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. And I bought into it. I was like, yeah, I could do this. Like, I know I'm in recovery, but this is fine. Like, you know, this sounds fine. And it's so stupid. I mean, it sounds like so idiotic now, but at the time it's so easy to get sucked in.
Yeah, that's why it's good you're sharing this.
Yeah.
Yes. You can hear that, see that objectively now. That's you. So you're telling me right now you're in recovery and you thought Beachbody would be a good idea, and you can laugh at that now. But when you're in that moment, you were probably convinced that this was fine. It wasn't going to be a problem. You're going to just do it in a balanced way. It's a lifestyle. It's not a diet. I'm going to be fine, right? So if you're listening to this and you're one of those people trying to convince yourself that something like this idea is a good idea in recovery, it will save you some time and some heartache. It's not a good idea. So
it will set you back. It set me back like probably about 2 weeks. And that was, I think, from a day, maybe 2 days, 2 days trying to do it, set me back like 2 weeks.
And you were a smart one to catch yourself in 2 days, right?
Yeah,
some people will be in denial for months trying to make that work, and it doesn't.
Exactly. And I'm so glad that I didn't. But at the same time, it is the only thing it will ever do is, so basically I think my extreme hunger had died off. So that's why I convinced myself, like, it's fine to do it. It's not fine to do it. The extreme hunger had died off. And I think I was in recovery maybe like 6 months. And then I had gained like 2 dress sizes. So I had gained probably, I was at, you know, my heaviest weight that I ever was at like 40 weeks pregnant. So I was panicking big time because I was the weight that I was when I gave birth to all of my babies, but yet I wasn't pregnant. So like, you know, in my mind,
I can relate to that. Yep.
Too big. And now, objectively speaking, looking back, I'm like, I was not too big. I was absolutely fine. Like that's, you know, so that's what I mean about your brain is sick. Like it's not telling you real truths. But anyway, so that was too big for me. So I was like, okay, I need to lose like a little bit of this weight. Like it's just, you know, when I lose this, then I can get back into recovery.
I've heard that before a few times.
Yeah. So I did like about 2 days, and I'll always remember the first day that I tried. And this is, you know, after going through all of extreme hunger, after getting rid of all the diet rules, after allowing myself to eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted for like 6 months, trying to get back into dieting was so difficult. Like I couldn't even get through one day. And when I did, I ended up binging, which is something that I hadn't done in quite a while, binging like straight away, either that evening or the next day. I can't really remember. And I think that was when I realized, okay, I don't binge anymore. Like this hasn't happened since the extreme hunger kind of like died down. Why am I doing this? And it set me back. Like I was back to, I felt, and it probably did leave it like, I had probably a couple of residual like little binges after that, because my body was like panicking. Like,
for sure. Sure. So smart.
Yeah. You're not feeding me anymore. I'm going to need to like pack this on again.
Yep.
And if anything, I don't actually know, because I don't think I was weighing myself, but if anything, I probably gained weight because of it. So what was the point? And I think I remember that did teach me that dieting was just not ever an option for me ever again, like for the rest of my life. I was like, how is this ever going to work? Like I have to just completely let it go and never ever return, because this only ever ends in misery. Like there's
Yeah,
no
totally.
other way. And you can look at it, you know, a lifestyle change, what it's a diet, like any type of restriction just doesn't work for me. Like something in my brain panics, and any kind of restriction makes me eventually want to binge, whether that's going to be the next day, the next week, the next month. And then I'm back to what, like bulimia, binging, like whatever you want to call it. Like I'm back in hell.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to do that
Really
anymore.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think those hiccups, when they happen, I mean, I don't want to say go out and seek them. They will naturally happen for most people at some point in recovery, but learn from them, right? Like you learned from that experience in those 2 weeks and few weeks that set you back. I think it's almost a blessing in hindsight that you had that, because now you know, like it's not something you're ever going to dabble in again, because you have confirmation, really clear confirmation that it's not ever going to be something that works for you. So yeah, I think that's great. Okay, did you have any breakthrough moments where you knew that things were changing in your brain, like the rewiring was actually like finally happening?
Yeah, I think what really stands out to me now, being like, well, I would consider myself to be fully recovered. And I've had some like negativity around that. Like when I've said that online, people have, I don't know, is it people that are still, it probably is actually still people that,
people that are fully
still,
recovered don't care if other people are recovered or not recovered or faking it. Like you just don't really care. So probably people are harassing you of that. Or probably not, but go ahead.
Yeah. People have said things like, oh, well, that's like nobody with an eating disorder would ever say that they're fully or nobody that's been through it would ever say that they're fully recovered, or everybody with an eating disorder knows that even if you recover, it's still with you for the rest of your life. And I really want to that, I just want to say, I don't feel like that's true. I did think that the first time, because I hadn't rewired my brain, and my brain was very much still like, you know, in diet culture and kind of like caught up in all of that stuff.
Right. And in that case, what they're saying is right. It will always be with you, and you will always have to like kind of like stay on top of it and make sure.
That's how I felt. For sure. Yeah. But this time I just don't feel that way. And so I feel like it's now that I realize, okay, things are different, like completely different. Like I just don't care about the things that I used to care about anymore. I don't weigh myself. I don't care I genuinely don't care what number is on the scale if I were to step on it right now. Like I just would not care. I'm not going to do it because I don't even want to go there, but I genuinely don't care. And I used to weigh myself multiple times a day when I was sick. I don't like talking about, you know, okay, I like food, but like I don't really talk about food.
Right.
I don't talk about diet culture stuff anymore. Like, oh, she's lost so much weight, or I wonder how much. Like it just doesn't interest me anymore. And it's kind of made me aware of how even my like friends of mine that don't have an eating disorder, how disordered as a society we are, especially as women, around like food and weight and all of that kind of stuff. Even people, you don't have to have a full-blown eating disorder to have like quite a negative relationship with all of that. And I think that's become more apparent to me in listening to other people and just kind of stepping outside that a bit and not participating. Whereas that used to be something that I loved to participate in. And I used to even like, you know, I'd watch YouTube videos on, and I'd research stuff on, and that just seems so boring to me now. Like I can't think of anything more boring.
Totally.
You know, I think that those kinds, like those moments when you realize like, wow, I don't care. Even things like, you know, so in earlier on in recovery, especially when your body's changing, sometimes I would catch myself like in say a picture or a screenshot or something, and I think, oh my gosh, you know, like, because I looked so different to how I had looked for the past 15 years.
Right. And it takes a while for your brain to catch up to the changes.
Yeah. And I really did have to work through that. But I think when I got to that place of just genuinely not caring, like I just genuinely didn't care, that's when I knew that things had changed. Because for me to not care, like that was a big deal. Like that was something that I never ever thought would ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny because when so I lost a bit of the overshoot weight.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a lot of questions about that now. That's probably the most common question that I get asked is
Mm-hmm.
about weight and like, how did you lose weight? And I
Mm-hmm.
always say to people, and they don't believe me, but I always say to
They
them,
won't.
I'm like, honestly, the weight loss, gain, whatever, is the least interesting part of my recovery. Like it is the
Mm-hmm.
least interesting factor to this
Mm-hmm.
whole thing. And I get
Mm-hmm.
it, because that was probably the question that I would have asked. But honestly, when you're through it, I mean, the most important and most interesting parts are like the friends that I gained, the
Totally.
life that I gained, the hobbies, the quality of life, like just all of the other things. The weight stuff just didn't even come into
Totally.
it. And had I
Totally.
not lost a pound of my overshoot, I genuinely wouldn't have cared. And I think that's the only reason why it even happened in the first place.
Exactly.
Is,
Yes.
yeah, my body just like let go of what it didn't need anymore. But it's because I
Right.
had like mentally let go,
Right. You move on, you live your life. You have found, and I'm with you on that. Like I had gotten to a place where I genuinely didn't care if I lost a pound. Like I was,
Yeah.
this is me. This is me. I figured out how to accept
Yeah.
it. I was enjoying all the benefits of recovery. I just didn't even really notice that it was happening. It wasn't
Yeah.
significant for me either, but it was,
Yeah.
a little bit. And it wasn't, that was the least, I talk about that the least because it's just not that interesting, and it didn't
Oh,
change anything. It didn't enhance my life because I lost my overshoot. It wasn't like I feel freer now because I'm fit. Like none of that. None of that.
yeah.
I'd already gotten to the place I wanted to mentally. And then whatever happened after that, as long as my mind was still right, I didn't care. And so it's
Exactly.
really good that you make that like point. That was the least important thing. Yet the people that are still struggling, that is the only thing they want to talk about. That is the
Yeah.
only thing. And I have to always redirect my clients, like, we're not going to discuss that right now. And that's not because I like refuse to tell you the truth about it, but it's just, let's not fixate on that, because really that's not going to help your brain to overcome this fear of weight gain
Exactly.
that we're trying to work
Yeah.
through. So yeah, it's really
Yeah.
good.
And also everybody's different, right? So like,
Everybody's different. Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it's difficult because I get it
Yep.
from from a sick brain point of view. I do
Mm-hmm.
understand that that is what you want to know the most about. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if I could just
Yeah.
like go back in time and reassure myself and all the other people out there that are in the same situation, that is just, it's not important. But
Right.
obviously, at that time it is important. So yeah, it's difficult,
Right.
but
It's
yeah,
so hard. People always want a reassurance that they're going to lose the overshoot weight. And I always tell them, like, well, if it is truly overshoot weight, then yes, you will, but there's no guarantee that you're for sure going to overshoot, because not everyone does. So I
yeah,
would never give
no,
anyone any reassurance that this is how much you're going to gain and overshoot, if you even do. And this is that when you're going to lose it. Like, no, not going to happen. It's different for everyone. So yeah, I
yeah.
think that's important to remember. Okay. Let's see. How did you get, or what did you get negative feedback about your body changing, and how did you cope with it? So you obviously have a huge platform on social media. Like, we're just going to say that you obviously are very much a role model. People listen and follow you. I can only imagine me, this little tiny person in the like social media realm. I can imagine my recovery wasn't online. I can only imagine even just one or two comments from strangers would have probably derailed me. I don't know. I hope it wouldn't have, but maybe it would have. You were like in the spotlight going through this. How
Yeah.
did you handle, and if you did, I'm guessing just anyone going through recovery is going to get negative feedback about something. So how did you handle that negative feedback, especially when it is directed or targeted towards your body?
Yeah. I mean, that was like, interestingly enough, when you asked me what the hardest part was, that I don't consider that to be the hardest part, but it was hard. It was difficult. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be lying if I said it wasn't.
Right.
I do remember, so like, obviously I had looked a certain way for as long as I'd been online, and then all of a sudden I changed.
Right.
I remember that we went to Disney it was in it was 2 years ago, so February 2020. 2020, yeah, February 2020. And we went to Disney in Disney World in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And this was just before the pandemic hit, so things were normal-ish.
Mm-hmm. No mask.
Yeah. And so I was on that trip, I think I had gained like probably most, if not all, of what I gained total. So it was pretty apparent that I'd gained weight. And a lot of people were speculating that I was pregnant, which I was not. So there was that. And yeah, like it was really, you would swear, I mean, all I had done was gained weight, but because of our culture and just how people are about women, you would think that I had killed somebody, like the amount of feedback that I was getting that was negative.
And sadly, I'm not even surprised by that, but it's so awful that that
it's just like
is the case.
And I think I just had to be, I mean, okay, so at this stage I had been online for a long time. I've been through stuff and like I've kind of got used to it. I think that probably did help to have that. It wasn't like I was new to the whole online world. So I did expect it, but I don't think I expected it to be as brutal, just because I hadn't actually done anything. Like I hadn't killed anybody, but that was the kind of feedback.
Checking yourself, did I do something that bad? I thought I was just trying to enhance my life, but maybe I have done something awful. Yeah.
No, it was like, and so, you know, people would, I would get DMs daily, like on Instagram, of people that had screenshotted, like, you know, really unflattering angles or really bad screenshots of, you know, me in a video or whatnot, you know, stomach rolls or back fat or whatever it was. And I just had to, I think what kept me going was I just had to remember, because it was hurtful. Sometimes it was more hurtful than other times. But I just had to remember how mentally, like my quality of life was so much better, that this stuff didn't matter. Like I would rather look this way and look ugly in their eyes, or unattractive in their eyes, and feel this really good quality of life that I'm feeling right now, than go back to skinny me who was maybe goals in their eyes and be absolutely miserable. Like I had a really good time in Disney. Like I had such a good experience, because I wasn't anywhere near fully recovered. I was like in the thick of it. I was still probably like extreme hunger was still somewhat there. And so I was just having fun. Like I just had a great time. And if anything, you know, it was probably one of the best like experience, like holiday experiences that I'd had, because I was finally allowing myself to just be free. So I was like, you know what? Yes, things are fitting really, really tight on me. And, you know, none of my clothes, even my new clothes that I bought in recovery, weren't fitting anymore.
Yeah, I went through that too.
That happens, you know? And so I was like, even though this is happening, I feel so happy, and like I feel so, you know, free for the first time in a long time. And I just had to cling on to that, even when things got really nasty. And that was really, really hard. Like I don't want to simplify it. I feel like every time I do a video like this, it just sounds really simple when it really wasn't. It's so much more complicated.
Right. But if you've been through it, you know, it wasn't simple. I can completely empathize with what that feels like.
Yeah.
When you have to kind of choose or pick. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you almost, like you have to make that choice. You have to just kind of like think to yourself, okay, well, you know, the alternative of going back is much, much worse than a few like negative comments or negative criticism. I think I'm just going to choose this rather than that, because you know, the other is just taking steps backwards, and you just know that that's never, ever going to make you happy. Like I was so unhappy before. So why would I want to go back to that?
Go back. Right. For me, it like came to a fork in the road where it was really evident to me that I had to choose, do I want to show up for my family, or do I want to show up for those strangers or those people at the gym who are praising me? Right. It's like, what matters more? These people on social media that live who knows how far away from you, you're never going to meet in real life. They just have nothing else to do with their time but to just tear you down. Are those the people we're going to put our effort and energy into trying to impress? Or are we going to focus within the walls of our own home, showing up and improving and enhancing our relationships with our family, our spouse, our kids, being a role model for them. Like, and when it started to become more clear, which it didn't till down the road, I couldn't even think clearly enough to go through that thought process. But as I got further down the road of like, I have a choice to make here. Do I keep pushing forward and allow this new body, or do I go back because of these comments or these looks I feel like I may be getting, or this disapproval from these strangers? And it was such a, like, in that moment, a clear decision for me. Like, I can't keep doing this to my family. I can't do this to myself, and I can't do this to my family. So
yeah. And I know that, obviously not everybody's going to have what I went through, but on the other hand, I think that a lot of people go through it with even like family members, like, parents or grandparents or aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters. Like, there's so much of that goes on. And I think in that case, probably just establishing like healthy boundaries with that person or those people that are making those comments is really important. But it's so hard. Like, I can't, I didn't personally have much of that because, I'm not living at home with my parents. I mean, I have my own family, it's different, but I can imagine if you're younger and you've got like that, you're living at home with your parents, and it's, like, that's difficult.
Totally.
And there can there can be some really negative things said to you by people that love you, but they just don't understand, or they're not, or they have their own issues going on. You just never know. Like, you just have to separate yourself from all of that rubbish.
Yeah. And I always tell people, like, you go ahead and recover. You keep doing what you know you need to do. And these people that really love you, I'm sure they do, will come to find out, wow, she is so much happier. She is so much happier, and she's recovered, right? Yeah. And you will then kind of have a platform for yourself, regardless how small or big it is, to be able to then speak and tell them about your experience, and they'll listen because they see that you're so much happier, right? And so, it isn't easy though, for sure. Last two questions. We'll wrap up here. How do you feel recovery's changed the way that you treat your husband and kids, or just in relationships in general? How do you feel like those have morphed or shifted or changed, hopefully for the better?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that's probably like the greatest gift, is I always felt like I really wanted to be a positive role model for my kids, but I knew that as long as I had an eating disorder, I just couldn't. Like, I was a complete hypocrite. I was always really, really careful about what I said and like the language that I used around them. But at the same time, like, how long can you hide something like that for? Even if you're careful, a child's going to walk in on you doing something, or they're going to observe something, like, and it was already happening. Like, if I'm completely honest, it was already happening. My eldest was 7 when I recovered, and now she's 9, and oh my gosh, the difference between a 7-year-old girl and a 9-year-old girl is huge.
Huge. So, I can tell you that for sure. Huge.
Yeah. And like, I even look at your kids now. I saw the pictures from when you were at Universal, and they look so big. And I think the last time I saw them, like in a video or a picture or something, they were like my kids' age that they are now.
It's crazy how fast they grow up, and they are so impressionable. So yay for you.
Exactly. And so I just think about what they're witnessing, and you can hide it for a certain amount of time, but you can't hide it forever. And I think it would have been I knew this in the back of my head, that it was only a matter of time. And I was going to have to make that choice of like, what kind of a mother do I want to be? Like, do I actually want to be a fully fledged, good, positive role model that was like, practicing what I preach? Or was I going to be some kind of like, I don't think I would have been a terrible, like, I don't think I ever would have let it get to the point where I was like a really awful role model, like with the things I said, but my actions would never have met up with, or, it just never would have made sense. And they're not stupid. Like, they would have realized.
Right.
Totally. So yeah, that's something that I'm really, really happy, and not even happy, just like grateful for. I definitely know for a fact that my husband and I mean, we've had a really good, like, I would say we have a strong relationship, but we've been together like 15 years, I think it is now. But we definitely, and he has said this too, we definitely don't argue or fight as much, because my moods are not like, they're more
Mm-hmm.
stable. You
Mm-hmm.
know, of course, I'm a woman, like I go through, there's like a week of the month that is a little bit
Yeah.
rockier than the others.
Yeah.
But
Why are
that's,
you crying all the time, Mom? I'm fine.
yeah,
I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
normal. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas before, because I was bulimic, so it was like, you know, lots of starvation. So really moody
Mm-hmm.
then. And then there was this sugar high. And so there was like
Yeah.
big like spike in my mood, and then it would go down again, you know. And so it was just
Right.
so difficult to keep up with, and I probably
Right.
didn't even realize myself. And I was
Yeah.
very negative, I think, as a person too. Like I'd put on a
Mm-hmm.
positive front, but inside, like in our relationship and like with the people I was closer to, I probably was quite negative. um
Right.
Hated my body, hated everything about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that can only be negative in a relation, like in an intimate relationship,
Totally.
you know.
Right.
um I kind of alienated myself from all of my friends during my eating disorder, so I'd really just had my husband. Now I have friends again. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
just
Yay.
now I have hobbies,
Yeah.
like I have things that I
Yeah.
actually enjoy doing,
Yeah.
whereas the only thing I enjoyed doing was food related, which is
Right. Yeah.
so boring and so just like isolating as well. So
Such a dead end. It never like,
yeah,
created something or
yeah,
finished a book or did anything that felt worthwhile in the time. At the
exactly.
moment it always did. Looking back, I'm just like, why did I
Yeah,
feel so busy all the time? And I was literally just all
yeah,
day long obsessing about food. Yeah.
yeah. And you know, I could never make plans before either, because I always felt like I had to, you know, I had to plan out, like, was this going to be a good day or a bad day, or was I going to binge and purge today, or, you know, like that always was at the forefront. So I could never make plans to like see people or do things, because there was always the eating disorder always came first. So now it's
Right.
just, I'm so much more like, I can't just, that's why I always say to people, like, that is the most important part, is like the inner peace that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And you just
Like a
feel so,
rebirth.
yeah, you feel so much more like grounded and happy and content. And there's not this kind of like manic like monster inside of you that's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a ball of negativity that's not
Mm-hmm.
there anymore. And when
Mm-hmm.
that's not there, it just opens up all of this space for you to do like all of these cool things, which is what life is
Mm-hmm.
actually about.
Yep.
um so
Oh, I
yeah,
love that.
that whole side of recovery is probably the best side, you know?
For sure. Yeah. I think the nature of an eating disorder makes us very critical of ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we're very critical of ourselves, we're very critical of others. This is just
Yeah.
a common thing that I've seen is when I'm tearing myself apart or I'm very critical of myself, which I very much was all the time, my eating disorder, I was very nitpicky and critical and
Yeah.
short with my family. And so I felt like as I started to have more grace and compassion for myself, I started to soften up a bit around my kids and my husband. And
Yeah.
it sounds like similar things happened to you as well, where it was like when you start like accepting and loving yourself and all of your flaws, it's easier to accept and love other people's shortcomings and
Yeah.
flaws. So yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Even something like as simple as music. Like I didn't listen to, I mean, I love music, but I didn't listen to music for my, I think for 15, like for my whole eating disorder. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't listen to it because I just didn't get enjoyment out of anything. And
Mm-hmm.
so, other than food. And so,
Right.
in my recovery, I started listening to music and like singing. Like my kids would hear me
Yeah.
singing in the house.
Oh, it's
Like
such
that,
a mood booster.
yeah,
Totally.
that did
Yeah.
not happen. And so I think I'm a way more fun, I would hope,
Right.
person to
Oh,
be
I'm sure
around.
your kids would say that for sure. I'm sure they would say you're
But I
more
don't
fun.
think they would have said that
Absolutely.
before. Like I don't think they would have just, you know, I just think, yeah, it's scary, like how
Right.
different it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah. That's so awesome. Okay. Last question is any advice you give to those listening to this interview? Obviously, you've given like so many good pieces of advice and little tidbits of information and experience that you've had. But any last closing remarks of just like, you could say something to those listening, what would that be?
I think probably my biggest piece of advice would be to not delay starting recovery. I think that's something that I did. Like I toyed with it for years, really, you know, and I was
Mhm.
kind of stuck in like a quasi recovery for a while, and it just,
Mm-hmm.
it was never really moving forward because like, you know, the things that you're doing to not move forward. Like if you're
Mm-hmm.
completely honest with yourself, you know
Mm-hmm.
that you're not fully relinquishing all control, and that's only going to prolong everything. So I
Right.
think if you see this as it's an investment, right? Like into your health, into your life. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you see it, it's really a short term, and like it's a short term thing. I know it seems so long term because you hear like, okay, recovery. I remember Googling like, how long does recovery take? And it was like
Yeah.
2 years. What?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that sounds so long, but if you think of your whole life, 2 years
Right.
is nothing. Like it's
Right.
really nothing. Um,
Right.
I
And
think,
those 2 years isn't like the hardest moments that you're
yeah,
going to experience. I think people cling on to that and think that for 2 years, I can't do
yeah,
that. It does
yeah,
get better and it does start to feel more feasible and you
yeah,
start seeing a light and things start changing. But yes, it is a process for sure. It's not
yeah.
an overnight fix.
And I think it will go slower the longer you kind of hold on or try to
Oh,
keep
absolutely.
like
Yep.
control. The quicker it will go quicker, you know, if you just kind of give over all of that control and just
Mm-hmm.
like completely give in to yeah, like just give in to recovery, like proper real
Mm-hmm.
recovery. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's no time like the present, and I think if anything, like I don't have any regrets, but if I could give myself any advice, it would be to start sooner than I did,
Mm-hmm.
not delay at all, because you're never ever going to regret starting or you're never ever going to regret recovery. Like there's
No.
nothing that anybody could say or you know, no picture that anyone could show me to
Mm-hmm.
sway me on that. Like it's just, it will never not be worth it. um
Right.
the only thing that I would regret, or not even regret, but the only thing that I would say is just to start now rather than later,
Right.
because
Right.
those are, you know, I do have that sometimes. And I think everybody probably with an eating disorder does. You have that eating disorder regret where you look back on the years that you were sick and you think, oh gosh, like I kind of wasted, you
That
know,
was the most
those.
painful part for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think back to even like throughout, you know, when my kids were really small, I'm like, oh gosh, like I didn't
Mm-hmm.
enjoy that time properly because I was sick.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but having said that, now that, you know, I've been through that, I don't necessarily regret it because it was just, that was part of my journey. That was what I had to do to get to where I
Right.
am now. But I'm just saying that to other people, if they haven't gone through that yet, like don't delay, like, you know, get it out of the way now, because
Right.
true recovery means that you won't ever go back. You don't ever have to go back to that. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's true freedom, which in my opinion does exist. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
think
Totally.
you can recover from an eating disorder and really not, you don't struggle. Like I've heard this myth before, and I remember even a psychologist that I went to years, it was actually the first time that I tried to recover, and I was seeing this psychologist who wasn't he was a man and he'd never been through an eating disorder before,
Right.
and he was doing like cognitive behavioral therapy, which I had some success with, but I don't think it really practically helped my eating disorder recovery. And I remember him saying to me, like, look, this is probably just something that you're going to have to, you know, you're going to have to live with like for the rest of your life. It's always going to
Mm-hmm.
be somewhat there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking it was like a death sentence. Like when he
Mm-hmm.
said that, I was like,
So depressing to hear.
yeah, but I believed it because he was professional. And as much as he was a professional, he'd never had an eating disorder before. So,
Right.
you
Right.
know, and then when I
Right.
found an eating disorder coach and I worked with her, and she was like, I've been through recovery and I can tell you that that is 100% not true. Like I never struggle anymore. And I was like, a part of me didn't believe it, but the other part of me was
Right.
curious enough to be like, okay, I'm going to have to take this chance, because his version
Totally.
is just not, I can't do that. Like that's not a
Right.
life that
Right. Why
his,
would you even try to change anything then if that's just
yeah,
it's always going to be there? Like, oh, yeah, totally.
no,
I agree with you. I think carrying that message of hope and knowing that like actually you don't have to live with this forever is very encouraging for
yeah,
people to get going in recovery. Yeah, that's so great. Anna, thank you so much for taking this time out of your day. I know we have a 7-hour difference, so this is like precious time in the evening where you could have been with your kids, and I'm so grateful to you for spending it with me. I really do appreciate it so much. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm sure you're going to help so many in this interview, and just as you carry on in being so vulnerable and so transparent on your own YouTube channel. And I know you're on Instagram as well. And just thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Keep doing what you're doing. You're awesome.
Thank you. Well, you too. I mean, I'm just really, really flattered that you asked me, because your channel helped me so much. So if I can do anything to pay it forward, then I'm happy to do that.
Oh, well, you definitely are. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you, Anna.
Bye.
Bye.